The laughter started soft, but grew louder with each slide. 17 alien species had gathered in the grand archive of Thessera Prime to share their ancient mythologies. The Morvani had presented their tales of sky spirits. The Thesserans spoke of their ocean gods. Each story received polite applause and scholarly discussion. Then came humanity's turn. Commander Nadia Okonkwo stood at the podium, her silver hair pulled back tight, her posture still military straight despite 20 years of retirement. Behind her, images flickered across the massive screen. Dragons breathing fire, serpents coiling around the world, wolves large enough to swallow the sun. These are the stories our ancestors passed down, she said calmly. Tales of creatures that ruled the earth before humanity rose. Ambassador Kelvari, a four-armed insectoid with compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds, made a clicking sound that her translator rendered as amusement. You believe giant lizards breathed fire? How did your species survive long enough to discover tools? More laughter rippled through the chamber. Scholar Reth, a gaseous being contained within a humanoid environmental suit, leaned forward. The mist inside his helmet swirled with what Nadia had learned to recognize as condescension. I have studied pre-spacefaring mythologies for 300 years. Human legends are, without question, the most absurdly violent collection ever recorded. Your ancestors imagined monsters under every rock and demon in every shadow. Perhaps, Nadia replied, keeping her voice steady, they had reasons. Fear, Kelvari said dismissively. Primitive minds create monsters to explain thunder and disease. Every young species does this. Most grow out of it. Nadia clicked to the next image. A painting of a massive serpent beneath churning waters. This is Jormungandr, the world's serpent. Norse mythology claimed it wrapped around the entire earth, sleeping beneath the ocean. The chamber erupted in open mockery. Sleeping beneath the ocean. Reth's suit vibrated with laughter. How convenient that it never surfaced for observation. Nadia continued through her presentation. Dragons from China and Europe. Thunderbirds from the Americas. The kraken from the northern seas. Each image brought more ridicule. The sophisticated aliens found endless amusement in humanity's primitive imagination. But Nadia noticed something strange. In the back row, an elderly Morvani archivist sat completely still. Unlike Reth, whose gas swirled with amusement, this one's containment suit had turned pale white, the color of fear. When Nadia mentioned the sleeping ones beneath the mountains, the old archivist flinched visibly. The presentation ended to scattered, mocking applause. Kelvari rose to deliver closing remarks about how humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Council remained a work in progress. Nadia gathered her materials quietly, her mind already working on what she had observed. She was halfway to the exit when a thin hand touched her elbow. The elderly archivist stood beside her, trembling. Up close, Nadia could see that his containment gas had not returned to its normal blue color. It remained pale, almost transparent. "You must stop," he whispered. "Stop speaking the old names." Nadia studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because they are not myths." His voice cracked. "They are warnings, and someone is waking them." The words hit Nadia like a physical blow. She had spent her career trusting her instincts, and every instinct now screamed that this terrified old being was telling the truth. "Who are you?" "Archivist Doran. I have spent 400 years cataloging extinct species and historical anomalies." He glanced around nervously. "The restricted archives. The files no one reads. I know what your legends truly are." "Then tell me." Doran shook his head rapidly. "Not here. Too many ears, too many eyes. Meet me in the lower archives at the third hour. Come alone." He pressed a small data chip in her palm. "Access codes. Tell no one." Before Nadia could respond, he shuffled away, disappearing into the crowd of departing scholars. She stood alone in the emptying chamber, the data chip warm in her hand. Around her, aliens continued to chuckle about human superstition, about dragons and serpents, and creatures too ridiculous to exist. But Nadia had fought in the siege of Argones 7. She had seen things that defied explanation. She had learned that the universe contained horrors that most species preferred to forget. She looked down at the chip. Her grandmother had told her stories when she was young. Stories about respecting the old tales, about remembering the songs, about why certain places should never be disturbed. Nadia had dismissed them as cultural traditions, nothing more. Now she wondered if her grandmother had known something the Galactic Council did not, or perhaps something they had chosen to forget. She pocketed the chip and walked toward the archives. Behind her, Ambassador Kelvari was still laughing with Scholar Reth about the absurdity of fire-breathing reptiles. Nadia did not look back. If Archivist Doran was right, those laughing aliens were about to learn why humanity had never forgotten its monsters, and why perhaps the galaxy should have listened to human legends all along. The lower archives smelled of dust and forgotten centuries. Nadia descended through levels that grew older with each step. The polished floors of the upper archives gave way to rough stone. The bright lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. She passed shelves filled with physical books, actual paper artifacts, records too old or too sensitive for digital storage. Archivist Doran waited in a small reading chamber, surrounded by stacks of ancient documents. His containment gas had returned to pale blue, but it still flickered with anxiety. "You came alone?" he asked. "I came alone." He gestured to a chair. "Why I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. For 100 years I have kept this secret. For 100 years I have watched and waited and hoped I was wrong." Wrong about what? Doran activated a holographic display. Images flickered to life, ancient recordings that predated the current Galactic Council by millennia. 10,000 years ago, he began, the species who built this station faced a crisis. Across dozens of worlds, creatures of impossible power began to stir. The Thesserans called them Void Weavers. My people named them the Hollow Kings. The Ricks remembered them as Bone Singers. The images showed devastation. Worlds burning, fleets scattered like toys. Creatures that defied physics, biology, and sanity. They were not invaders from another galaxy, Doran continued. They had always been here, sleeping in the depths of planets, in the hearts of stars, in the spaces between dimensions. The first spacefaring civilizations woke them by accident. Nadia watched the footage in silence. The creatures moved wrong, their bodies shifting in ways that hurt to look at. How were they stopped? Not stopped. Contained. Doran switched to a different set of images. Complex devices, quantum locks, dimensional seals. The ancestors of every current council species worked together. They developed technology to force the creatures back into dormancy and seal them away. Then they buried all evidence. Why bury it? Fear. Shame. The creatures could not be killed, only contained. The council's founders believed that if future generations knew the truth, they might try to study the creatures or use them as weapons. Doran's gas darkened. They chose to let the memories become myths. Every species forgot, except in their oldest stories. Nadia thought of her grandmother's tales. Dragons beneath mountains, serpents in the sea, warnings disguised as bedtime stories. And Earth. Doran's trembling increased. Earth was classified as a high-concentration zone. Your planet contains some of the most powerful entities ever cataloged. When humanity achieved faster-than-light travel, the Council debated destroying your world entirely. The words hung in the air like poison. They decided against it, Doran continued. Instead, they chose to monitor humanity closely, to mock your legends, to dismiss your myths, to ensure you never took your own stories seriously enough to investigate. Nadia felt cold anger building in her chest. They kept us ignorant on purpose. For 300 years, yes. But now something has changed. Doran pulled up a new display. Seismic readings from 12 different worlds. The quantum locks are failing. Someone is breaking them open. Who? A faction within the Council itself. They believe the galaxy has grown weak and corrupt. They think releasing the creatures will force a reset, destroying most civilizations and leaving only the strong to rebuild. Doran handed her a data crystal. I intercepted their communications. Their first target is already chosen. Nadia took the crystal. Earth. The sealed chamber beneath your Mariana Trench. The entity your ancestors called the World Serpent, among other names. If it wakes uncontrolled, your planet's surface will be reshaped. Billions Vildi. The chamber fell silent. Nadia stared at the data crystal in her hand, processing the impossible truth. Everything she had been taught about human mythology, about primitive superstition, about the superiority of advanced species, it was all a lie built on fear. "Why tell me?" she finally asked. "Because I read your service record. The Siege of Argones, 7. You held a position for 16 days against impossible odds because you refused to accept defeat." Doran's gas flickered. "The Council will not act. They are too divided, too corrupt, too afraid. But you, Commander, you might be crazy enough to try." Nadia stood, pocketing the data crystal. "I'll need a ship and a crew I can trust. I can provide coordinates and access codes. The rest is your burden to carry." She moved toward the exit, then paused. "For 100 years you kept this secret. Why speak now?" Doran's containment suit dimmed. "Because I am old, Commander, and I would rather die having told one honest soldier the truth than live another century drowning in lies." Nadia nodded once and left the chamber. She had a world to save and very little time to save it. Behind her, Doran remained alone among his ancient documents, finally at peace. Somewhere over the Pacific, a fisherman pulled up his net and found it filled with dead fish. Their eyes burned white as if they had seen something terrible in the depths. Nadia received this report aboard the Stalwart Hope as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Earth. Captain Lyra Andrade, her former second-in-command, stood beside her on the bridge. Behind them, Ambassador Kelvari and Scholar Reth waited in uncomfortable silence. The two aliens had insisted on coming. Kelvari claimed diplomatic necessity. Reth claimed scientific curiosity. Nadia suspected both were simply terrified by what they had learned in the archives and afraid to be left alone. "Approaching Earth orbit," Lyra announced. "Admiral Tanaka is requesting identification. Tell her it's me. Tell her I need a priority meeting. And tell her to start quietly mobilizing the home defense fleet." Lyra raised an eyebrow, but transmitted the message. 2 hours later, Nadia stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense platform, facing Admiral Yuki Tanaka. The Admiral was small, sharp-eyed, and utterly unimpressed by dramatic revelations. "You expect me to believe," Tanaka said slowly, "that dragons are real. Not just dragons." Nadia activated the holographic display, showing the data Doran had provided. "Sea serpents, thunderbirds, every monster story your ancestors told around campfires. They were warnings, Admiral. Survival instructions passed down through generations." Tanaka studied the footage of ancient devastation. Her face revealed nothing. "And this thing in the Mariana Trench? Already waking. The research station Abyssal Watch has been reporting anomalous readings for months. Nobody paid attention because nobody believed. At that moment, the communication came through. Dr. Samuel Mbeki, chief scientist at Abyssal Watch, appeared on screen. His dark skin had gone pale, his eyes wide with barely controlled fear. "Admiral, Commander, we have a situation. Something just moved down here. Something 7 kilometers long. Heat signatures that shouldn't exist at these depths. And the sounds." He swallowed hard. "They sounded like nothing in any database, but they almost sound like singing." Tanaka's composure cracked slightly. 7 kilometers? That's the portion we can detect, Admiral. There may be more." Scholar Reth made a small whimpering sound. His containment gas had gone completely white. "Deploy sensor buoys," Tanaka ordered. "I want constant monitoring of that trench. And get every available ship into defensive positions around the Pacific Rim." Over the next 6 hours, reports flooded in from around the world. Fishing villages along the Japanese coast spoke of lights in the deep water. Hawaiian elders said the ocean was singing old songs that had not been heard in centuries. Native communities along the American Northwest coast performed rituals that had been dormant for generations, warning that the old ones were stirring. And in the Mariana Trench, something continued to rise. Nadia stood on the observation deck of Abyssal Watch. a reinforced platform anchored to the ocean floor by massive cables. Through the thick viewing windows, she could see only darkness and occasional flickers of bioluminescent life. Then the lights began. They started deep below, a soft blue glow that grew brighter with each passing minute. Something was ascending, something vast. All personnel to secure positions, Dr. Mbeki announced over the intercom. His voice shook. We have visual contact with whatever this is. It rose from the darkness like a living mountain. Nadia had seen warships that stretched for kilometers. She had witnessed space stations that dwarfed planets. None of it prepared her for this. The creature's head alone was larger than the research station. Its body vanished into the depths below, coiled and endless. Scales the size of buildings caught the station's lights and reflected them in patterns that hurt to look at. Eyes like twin suns opened and focused on the tiny bubble of human presence. Behind Nadia, Reth collapsed entirely. Kelvari fell to her knees and began praying in a language the translator could not process. But the creature did not attack. Instead, a smaller form detached from somewhere along its impossible length. A serpent perhaps 50 meters long, still terrifying but somehow more manageable. It swam toward the station with deliberate grace. And then it spoke, not through sound but directly into Nadia's mind, in words that felt ancient and heavy with meaning. The language was Sanskrit, a tongue dead for millennia, yet she understood it perfectly. The mother stirs. The covenant is broken. Will humanity stand as wardens once more, or fall as prey? Nadia stepped forward, pressing her hand against the cold glass. What covenant? She asked aloud, unsure if it could hear her. The serpent's eyes glowed brighter. Come to the deep places. Remember what your ancestors knew. The choice approaches, daughter of Earth, and the galaxy's fate rests on what you choose. It turned and dove back toward the mother's vast form. Nadia watched it go, her heart pounding with fear and something else. Something that felt almost like recognition. Her grandmother had told her stories. Now those stories wanted an answer. The submersible descended through crushing darkness, its lights cutting weak paths through water that had never known sunlight. Nadia sat in the pilot's seat, guiding the craft toward coordinates that no human had ever visited. Behind her, Dr. Mbeki monitored their systems with trembling hands. Captain Lyra maintained a grip on her sidearm, as if it could protect them from creatures of legend. Scholar Reth had insisted on coming, his terror overwhelmed by scientific obsession. Depth 7,000 meters, Mbeki reported. We're approaching the seafloor, but the readings show a structure ahead. Something artificial. Artificial. Lyra leaned forward. At this depth, the pressure should make construction impossible. Yet there it is. The lights found it a moment later. Walls of black stone rose from the ocean floor, carved with symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Arches framed openings into deeper darkness. The architecture belonged to no human civilization, yet it felt strangely familiar. Those carvings, Reth whispered. I recognize the pattern language. It matches fragments found on a dozen dead worlds. Whoever built this, they built across the entire galaxy. Nadia guided the submersible through the largest arch. The interior opened into a vast chamber, its walls covered with images that told a story older than human memory. She activated the craft's recording systems and stepped out through the airlock, her pressure suit protecting her from the crushing weight of the ocean. Walking on the ancient floor felt like walking through a dream. The carvings depicted Earth in its youth. Creatures of impossible scale roamed freely, their forms matching the dragons, serpents, and beasts of every human legend. And among them, small figures that were unmistakably human. But the humans were not running or hiding. They were standing beside the creatures, speaking to them. They lived together, Nadia said softly. The first humans and the great beasts. They weren't enemies. Becky joined her, studying the walls with academic fascination despite his fear. Look at this section. There's a change. Something arrived. The next series of carvings showed shapes descending from the sky. Tall, slender figures with features remarkably similar to humans, but more refined, more symmetrical. They carried objects that radiated light. Star visitors, Lyra read the symbols aloud. That's what the carvings call them. They came to help. The story continued. The great beasts had begun to wake too often, their stirrings causing earthquakes and floods that threatened the young human species. The star visitors offered a solution. They taught humans songs, melodies that could speak to the creatures on a level beyond sound, frequencies that touched something deeper than flesh. The binding songs, Becky breathed. The legends mention them. Orpheus charming beasts with music. Native chants that calmed storms. Aboriginal songlines that shaped the land. They were all fragments of this. Reth's gas swirled with growing understanding. It's not magic. It's quantum harmonics. Sound frequencies that affect dimensional anchoring. The songs literally adjust the creature's relationship with physical reality. They moved deeper into the complex until they reached a central chamber. In the middle stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal rested a crystal tablet, still glowing faintly after millennia. Nadia approached it carefully. As she drew near, the tablet pulsed with light, and a figure materialized in the air above it. A hologram of one of the star visitors, preserved for exactly this moment. It looked almost human, almost familiar. "Greetings, child of Earth," the figure said. Its voice was warm, but carried immense weight. "If you have found this place, then the covenant has failed and the mother stirs. You carry the blood of the first wardens in your veins. The choice falls to you." "First wardens?" Nadia asked. "Your ancestors. They agreed to become caretakers of the great beasts, to learn the songs, to keep the balance. In return, they gained strength, resilience, and the fierce spirit that defines your species. The bargain shaped humanity into what it is today." The hologram gestured, and new images appeared. Humans singing in ancient temples, chants echoing across mountain ranges, ceremonies performed under starlit skies. The songs were meant to be preserved across generations. But time erodes all things. The melodies fragmented, the knowledge scattered. The star visitors departed, trusting humanity to remember. "We forgot," Nadia said quietly. "We turned the songs into stories and the stories into fairy tales. Yet you kept them. In children's games and grandmother's lullabies. In prayers and rituals whose meaning was lost, but whose pattern survived. The songs still exist, scattered across your cultures. They need only to be gathered and sung as one." The hologram stepped closer, its eyes meeting Nadia's with desperate intensity. The mother wakes because the seals were broken deliberately by those who wish destruction. You cannot fight her with weapons. She's beyond war. But she remembers the covenant. She remembers the songs. If humanity sings together, she will hear. She will remember the bond, and she will choose to sleep again. The tablet pulsed once more, and data began streaming into the submersible's computers. Musical notations, frequency patterns, translations of ancient texts from every human culture. "I have given you everything," the hologram said, its form beginning to fade. "The rest depends on humanity's choice. Will you remember what you are? Will you sing?" The light faded. Nadia stood alone in the ancient chamber, the weight of a world on her shoulders. Behind her, the others waited in stunned silence. Finally, Becky spoke. "Commander, this data. It connects fragments we've found everywhere. Sumerian tablets, Sanskrit hymns, Aboriginal songlines, Navajo chants. They're all pieces of the same song." Nadia picked up the crystal tablet and turned toward the submersible. "Then let's put them together." Nadia's broadcast reached every corner of human space within hours. She stood in the command center of Abyssal Watch, speaking directly to a camera while footage played behind her. The ancient ruins, the crystal tablet, the hologram's message, and the terrifying reality of the mother rising from the deep. "This is not a request for military aid," she said into the lens. "This is a call to remember. Every culture on Earth has songs that calm, that heal, that speak to something beyond words. Those songs are not superstition. They are tools our ancestors left us for exactly this moment." She held up the crystal tablet. "This contains the complete binding melody, translated into forms every culture can recognize. We need singers, Chanters, anyone who knows the old ways. And we need every human being who can carry a tune to join their voice to ours. The response split Earth in half. Some colonies laughed, calling it hysteria. News networks debated whether Commander Okonkwo had lost her mind. Political leaders demanded more conventional solutions. But others listened. In India, temple singers recognized patterns from Vedic chants and began practicing immediately. In Australia, Aboriginal elders said they had been waiting for this call for generations. In the American Southwest, Navajo communities pulled out ceremonial recordings that had been forbidden for decades. In West Africa, griots who carried oral histories going back centuries declared that the time of remembering had arrived. Within 48 hours, the binding song had been reconstructed. But 48 hours was not fast enough. The mother continued rising. Earthquakes shook the Pacific Rim. Tsunamis threatened coastal cities. Millions evacuated inland, while navies positioned themselves along impossible defensive lines. And then Scholar Reth made his discovery. He burst into the command center, his containment gas cycling through colors so fast it made Nadia dizzy. "Commander, I've been analyzing the quantum lock frequencies. They didn't fail naturally. They were sabotaged." Nadia's blood went cold. The Council faction? Yes, but there's more. They're broadcasting a counter-frequency from somewhere in lunar orbit. As long as that signal operates, it will disrupt the binding song's harmonic structure. You could have every human on Earth singing in perfect unison, and it won't work. Captain Lyra stepped forward. "Can we locate the broadcast source?" "Already have." Reth projected coordinates. "A council vessel hiding in the moon's shadow. They're jamming us from orbit." Admiral Tanaka's voice came through the communication system. "Commander Okonkwo, are you seeing this?" "I see it, Admiral. I need a strike team." "You have one. The patrol ship Defiant is ready for launch." "Captain Andrade, you have command." Lyra nodded grimly. "I'll need volunteers for what's probably a one-way trip." The response was immediate. Every soldier in range volunteered. Lyra selected the best and suited up within the hour. Meanwhile, the mother's rising accelerated. Her head broke the surface of the Pacific at sunset. Even from hundreds of kilometers away, observers could see her against the horizon, a mountain that moved, a god-made flesh. Ships scattered before her wake. Aircraft attempting reconnaissance either fled or simply stopped transmitting. She did not attack. Not yet. She simply rose, stretching limbs that had been folded for millennia, testing a world she had not seen since before humans built their first cities. But her movements alone caused devastation. Waves crashed against shorelines. The ocean floor shifted. Fault lines groaned under pressure that defied measurement. Time was running out. Ambassador Kelvari, who had spent days in shocked silence, finally approached Nadia. Her compound eyes reflected the mother's distant form. "My people have old songs too," she said quietly. "Stories we dismissed as primitive nonsense. But I remember them from my childhood, before education taught me they were meaningless. Will your government help?" "My government will do nothing. But I have already contacted others who remember. The Thesserans are not the only ones who forgot. And we're not the only ones afraid of what we forgot." Within hours, transmissions arrived from across the galaxy. The Morvani contributed harmonic frequencies their ancestors had once used. The Rix sent ritual patterns preserved in their bone singer temples. Even species that had never trusted humanity offered fragments of forgotten songs, united by shared terror of what was waking. The galaxy was remembering together. But none of it would matter if Lyra failed. Nadia watched the Defiant launch toward the moon, carrying her closest friend toward near-certain death. She wanted to be aboard that ship, fighting beside her soldiers as she had for 30 years. Instead, she stood on a platform surrounded by musicians, singers, and chanters from every human culture, preparing to lead the most important performance in history. The counter-frequency still pulsed from lunar orbit. The mother continued to rise. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Lyra raced against time to give humanity one chance to remember who they truly were. Fire lit up the darkness of lunar orbit. The Defiant found the Council vessel hidden in the moon's shadow. It was larger than expected, bristling with weapons designed to destroy ships far bigger than Lyra's patrol craft. "All hands, this is the captain," Lyra announced. "Our job is to kill that broadcast array. Everything else is secondary. If we take damage, we push through. If we lose crew, we push through." "Understood." 30 voices answered as one. "Understood, Captain." The Council vessel opened fire immediately. The Defiant was faster, dancing through missile clusters and energy beams, but it couldn't evade forever. "Boarding pods ready," Lyra ordered. "We go in hot." The pods launched. Back on Earth, Nadia felt the battle through radio silence. Each minute of no communication was another minute Lyra fought for her life. She stood on the deck of the carrier Defiance, surrounded by thousands of singers gathered from across the planet. Screens showed similar gatherings in every nation. Satellite uplinks connected human colonies throughout the galaxy. The combined network represented billions of voices, all waiting for the signal to sing. But the counterfrequency still broadcast from lunar orbit. Without Lyra's success, the song would fail. The mother had fully surfaced now. Her body stretched across the Pacific like a new continent. Scales caught sunlight and threw rainbow patterns across the waves. Her eyes, each larger than a stadium, turned toward the gathered humans with ancient curiosity. She remembered. She remembered the small, warm creatures who had once sung to her, who had asked her to sleep when the world was young, who had promised to wake her when it was time. But it was not time. The seals were broken by betrayal, not by choice. And without the proper song, she would have no reason to sleep again. She opened her mouth, and the roar that emerged shattered windows along every Pacific coastline. "Commander!" Becky shouted over the noise. "The crystal tablet is resonating. It's trying to connect with her, but the counterfrequency is blocking it." "Keep it ready," Nadia ordered. "The moment that jamming stops, we sing." In lunar orbit, Lyra led her team through corridors of the enemy vessel. They had lost 8 soldiers breaching the hull. They lost 6 more fighting to the broadcast center. The enemy was desperate, knowing their plan had failed, but determined to see it through to destruction. Lyra reached the broadcast array with only 4 soldiers remaining. "Set the charges," she commanded. Her shoulder bled from a wound she had stopped noticing. "Get it done." The explosives attached. The timer started. "Fall back to the pods," Lyra ordered. 2 more soldiers fell, covering the retreat. Lyra dragged the last survivor into a boarding pod and launched it toward the Defiant. Behind them, the Council vessel's broadcast array erupted in fire and silence. The counterfrequency died. The signal reached Earth instantly. "Now," Nadia said into the global broadcast. "Sing now." And humanity sang. Billions of voices joined in a melody older than civilization. Temple chants from India merged with Aboriginal songlines from Australia. African rhythms wove through Native American prayers. European folk songs harmonized with Asian ceremonial music. Every fragment of the ancient binding song, preserved across millennia through stories and traditions, rose together as one voice. The crystal tablet amplified the harmony. Alien frequencies from a dozen species added their own patterns. The sound became something beyond music, a vibration that touched dimensions humans could barely perceive. The mother heard, her ancient eyes, filled with power that could reshape continents, focused on the tiny figure standing on the carrier deck. A human woman holding a crystal tablet, singing words that no one had spoken properly in 10,000 years. And the mother remembered. She remembered the covenant. She remembered the partnership. She remembered when humans were small and brave and stood beside the great beasts not as servants or masters, but as friends. The song was not a command. It was a request. "Sleep, ancient one. Sleep and dream. The world is not ready. But we remember you. We will always remember you." The mother's roar softened into something that sounded almost like a purr. Slowly, impossibly, she began to descend. Her vast body coiled back toward the depths. Her eyes closed. The earthquake subsided. The tsunamis calmed. She sank beneath the waves with a final glance toward the singers, a glance that felt like both gratitude and promise. The covenant was renewed. 3 months later, Nadia stood before the reformed Galactic Council. Scholar Reth had published his findings, forcing the galaxy to confront truths it had buried for millennia. Ambassador Kelvari led a new initiative to recover and preserve the warning stories of every species. Humanity's legends were not primitive superstition, Kelvari announced to the Assembly. They were the most sophisticated early warning system the galaxy has ever seen. We mocked what we should have studied. That error nearly cost us everything. The chamber fell silent. Nadia did not gloat. She simply stood as a witness to change. Later, at home on Earth, she visited her granddaughter's school. The children gathered around her, eyes wide with wonder. "Were the monsters real?" a small girl asked. Nadia smiled. "They are real. They sleep beneath the mountains and the seas, in places we cannot reach. But as long as we remember the songs, they remain our friends." She began to sing softly, and the children joined her, learning words their great-grandparents had once known by heart. In the depths of the Mariana Trench, the mother dreamed peacefully. And across the galaxy, species that had forgotten began, at last, to remember.